Hey guys, tonight we're diving into your subconscious mind. We'll see a collection of insights about how your mind actually works beneath the surface. These aren't mystical secrets or motivational fluff, but psychological principles and neurological patterns that most people never consciously recognize, let alone use strategically. Before we get started, if you find value in what I create here, go ahead and like the video and subscribe, but only if it genuinely serves you. And drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. I'm always curious to know who's tuning in from around the world. Now, settle in, get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillows or let some ambient sound fill the background. We're going to explore how your subconscious processes the world, from the prediction algorithms your brain runs constantly, to the way memory reconstructs itself every time you recall it, to the chemical systems you can learn to influence directly. Some of this might challenge assumptions you've held for years. Some of it might feel immediately useful. All of it is drawn from cognitive science, behavioral psychology, and neuroscience research. So let's ease into this journey together and see what shifts when you understand the mechanisms running beneath your conscious awareness. Let's begin with how your brain handles prediction and surprise. The expectation violation reset. Right now, your brain is predicting everything. What I'll say next, how this sentence will end, what you'll do after listening to this. Your subconscious is running constant simulations, trying to minimize surprise. It's called the free energy principle, a theory by Carl Friston that suggests your brain's primary job isn't to react to the world, but to predict it. Here's the exploit. When your predictions fail, something remarkable happens. Your brain releases norepinephrine and enters what neuroscientists call a heightened learning state. It's like your neural networks suddenly become more plastic, more open to rewiring. So do this. Deliberately violate your own expectations. Take a different route to work tomorrow. Brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand. Sit in a different chair at your desk. These aren't just quirky habits. They're neural interventions. The moment your prediction fails, when your hand reaches for the toothbrush and finds it harder to control, when you turn left instead of your habitual right, your brain enters a 15-minute window where memory encoding improves by about 40%. Use that window. That's when you introduce the new thought pattern, the new behavior, the thing you've been trying to change. Most people spend their entire lives reinforcing the same neural pathways. You're going to deliberately disrupt yours. Not randomly, strategically. Because in the chaos of broken predictions, your brain becomes teachable again. The semantic satiation exploit. Let's talk about the words that haunt you. Failure, rejection, inadequate, stupid. Whatever yours is, it has power because your brain has fused the word with an emotion. The language sits in your left temporal lobe, but the feeling lives in your amygdala, and somehow they've become one thing. Here's how you separate them. Say the word aloud, rapidly, 30 times. Go ahead. Pick your poison and repeat it until it becomes absurd. Failure, 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 failure. What you're experiencing is called semantic satiation. Your language processing system gets overwhelmed and temporarily shuts down the meaning. The word becomes pure sound, syllables without substance. And here's what matters. When meaning collapses, the emotional charge collapses with it. This isn't permanent, but it gives you a window. A moment where failure is just a noise you make with your mouth, not an identity, not a prophecy. Use that window to examine the thought without the feeling crushing you. Because the word only has power when it means something. Strip the meaning, and you're left holding nothing but air. The research on verbal repetition shows this works because language and emotion are processed in anatomically distinct regions. Overload one circuit, and you temporarily disconnect the other. It's not poetry, it's neurology, and you can use it. Bilateral stimulation for emotional processing. When you're carrying something heavy emotionally, grief, anger, anxiety that won't resolve, your brain is trying to process it but doesn't have the bandwidth. The memory or emotion is stuck, looping, because the neural integration hasn't completed. There's a technique from trauma therapy called EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. The mechanism is bilateral stimulation, and you don't need a therapist to use the basic principle. Sit down. Start tapping your knees alternately, left, right, at about 1 tap per second. Or move your eyes side to side without moving your head. Or alternate tapping your shoulders. While you do this, think about the thing that's bothering you. Don't force anything. Just hold the emotion while maintaining the bilateral rhythm. What's happening is profound. You're activating both brain hemispheres in an alternating pattern. Research by Francine Shapiro shows this mimics what naturally occurs during REM sleep, the phase when your brain processes emotional memories and integrates them into your existing narrative. You're essentially giving your brain the conditions it needs to finish processing. The emotion that felt stuck starts to move. Not disappear, move. Shift. Become something you've metabolized instead of something you're choking on. This isn't magic. It's just giving your bilateral brain the rhythm it needs to do what it already knows how to do. 5 minutes of this can accomplish what hours of rumination cannot. The proprioceptive anchor. You're about to walk into a meeting, give a presentation, have a difficult conversation. Your heart rate is climbing, your thoughts are racing, and everyone can see you trying to control your breathing. Here's what they can't see. Press your tongue firmly to the roof of your mouth. At the same time, squeeze your toes inside your shoes. Hold both for a count of 5. What you've just done is activate your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system that counteracts fight or flight. But unlike deep breathing, which everyone notices, this is invisible. Your body is sending a signal to your brain. We're grounded, we're stable, we're safe. This works through proprioception, your brain's map of where your body is in space. When you create specific, controlled tension in these areas, you're feeding your subconscious data that contradicts the anxiety signal. The tongue-to-palate position specifically activates vagal tone. The toe squeeze grounds you literally and neurologically. Research on embodied cognition shows that your brain reads your body's state and adjusts your mental state to match. You're not thinking your way to calm. You're using your body to tell your brain a different story, and your brain believes it. No one sees it, but you feel it. That's the point. The cognitive load dumping. You know that feeling when you have 17 browser tabs open in your mind, and you can't focus on any of them because they're all screaming for attention simultaneously? Your working memory has a limit, about 4 to 7 items, depending on whose research you trust. Right now, you're probably exceeding it. Before you try to make a decision, solve a problem, or do anything requiring clear thought, do this. Open a blank document or grab a piece of paper. Set a timer for 2 minutes. Write down every single thought in your head. Don't organize. Don't edit. Don't even complete sentences if you don't want to. Just dump. Need to email Sarah. Worried about money. Forgot to call back. What's for dinner? That thing I said yesterday. Coffee sounds good. Am I good enough? Get it all out. Every background process, every anxiety tab, every reminder and worry and fragment. What you're doing is externalizing your internal dialogue. Research on expressive writing shows this frees up cognitive resources by as much as 30%. It's like clearing RAM on a computer. The thoughts don't disappear, but they're no longer actively consuming processing power. Your subconscious was trying to hold all of that, all at once, and it was failing. Now it's written down. It exists outside your head. And suddenly, your working memory has space to actually work. This isn't journaling for insight. This is technical maintenance. You're emptying the cache so the system can run. The reverse priming protocol. Every input primes you for certain thoughts. If you read business articles before trying to write creatively, you've just primed your brain for analytical, corporate thinking. If you scroll social media before deep work, you've primed yourself for distraction and comparison. Most people prime themselves accidentally, then wonder why they can't access the mental state they need. Here's the reverse. Before creative work, deliberately expose yourself to something conceptually distant. Spend 3 minutes looking at abstract art. Listen to music in a genre you've never explored. Read poetry in translation. Watch a nature documentary with the sound off. Your subconscious builds connections through semantic networks, concepts linked to related concepts. When you prime yourself with task-adjacent material, you narrow those networks. You're thinking inside the box before you even start. But when you prime yourself with something distant, weird, unrelated, you activate nodes in completely different parts of your semantic web. Research on creative problem solving shows that conceptually distant priming leads to more novel solutions. You're not contaminating your focus, you're expanding your possibility space. The most creative insights come from unusual connections. You can't make unusual connections if you only activate the usual networks. So before you need to be creative, feed your brain something strange. Then watch what happens when you sit down to work. Your brain will find connections you didn't know existed, because you gave it permission to look in places you usually ignore. The foveal narrowing technique. You're overwhelmed. Thoughts spiraling. Everything feels urgent and nothing feels manageable. Your default mode network, the brain system responsible for rumination, self-reference, and mental time travel, is in overdrive. Here's the interrupt. Find a single point. A spot on the wall. A letter on the screen. Anything. Stare at it. Don't let your eyes move. Don't let them wander. Just hold your gaze on that single point for 60 seconds. What you're doing is forcing your brain into foveal vision, narrow, concentrated focus. When you do this, you activate your ventral attention network, the system designed for detecting and tracking specific targets. And here's the critical part. This network directly suppresses your default mode network. Research on visual attention shows that forced visual focus literally overrides rumination at a neurological level. You can't spiral and focus simultaneously. The brain can't do both. This isn't meditation. You don't need to clear your mind or count your breaths. You just need to stare. Hold the point. Let everything else blur. Your thoughts will still be there, but they'll quiet. Not because you're controlling them, but because you've activated a brain system that's incompatible with rumination. 60 seconds. 1 point. Your brain will reset. The temporal binding window. Your brain doesn't experience time linearly. It experiences it in chunks. Events that happen within about 200 to 1,000 milliseconds get bound together in your perception as causally related, as part of the same event. You can exploit this for momentum. When you finish one task, don't pause. Don't check your phone. Don't just quickly do something else. Within 90 seconds, start the next related task. What happens is your brain still has active neural traces from the first task. The networks are warm. The context is loaded. When you immediately start the next thing, your brain treats it as a continuation of the same event, not a new initiation. Research on perceptual binding shows this is how your brain creates unified experiences from fragmented inputs. You can use this principle behaviorally. String related tasks together within these narrow windows, and your brain experiences them as one flowing activity rather than multiple separate starts. Starting is the hardest part. This hack lets you start once and ride the momentum through multiple tasks. Your brain's temporal binding becomes your productivity engine. Don't break the window. Keep the traces active. Let one thing flow into the next before the neural context collapses. The hemispheric activation switch. Your brain has two hemispheres with different specializations. Left, analytical, logical, sequential, verbal. Right, creative, holistic, spatial, intuitive. Most people treat this as fixed. You're either left-brained or right-brained. But there's a physical switch. Your motor cortex is contralateral. The right side of your body is controlled by your left hemisphere, and vice versa. Before analytical work, writing an email, analyzing data, logical problem solving, tense your right hand. Make a fist, squeeze, hold it for 10 seconds. You've just preferentially activated your left hemisphere. Before creative work, brainstorming, design, storytelling, tense your left hand. Same principle, opposite side. Research by Ruth Proper shows that unilateral muscle contraction selectively activates the opposite brain hemisphere within 20 seconds. You're not thinking your way into a cognitive mode. You're physically switching it on. This sounds absurd until you try it. Then you'll notice. The analytical mindset comes online faster when you've primed the left hemisphere. The creative flow arrives more readily when you've activated the right. You have a physical switch for mental states. Most people never learn where it is. Now you know. The memory reconsolidation window. Here's something most people don't know. Every time you remember something, you're not retrieving a file. You're recreating it. And in that recreation, the memory becomes temporarily unstable, open to modification. This is called the reconsolidation window, and it lasts about 5 hours after recall. During this time, the memory you just accessed is labeled, changeable, before it gets stored again. So if you have a limiting memory, a moment of humiliation, failure, rejection that plays on repeat, recall it deliberately. Then immediately replace it with a corrective experience or thought. Not denial. Not, it wasn't that bad, but a genuine reframe or new association. Research by Kareem Nader shows that recalled memories can be edited during reconsolidation. You're not erasing the past, you're updating the meaning you've attached to it. Most people avoid painful memories, which keeps them frozen in their original form. You're going to do the opposite, access them deliberately, then rewrite them while they're still soft. The memory is already in your head. It's already affecting you. You might as well be the one who decides what it means. This is memory editing, and the window is open every time you remember. The micro-expression hold. Watch someone receive good news and flash an instant smile. It looks fake, doesn't it? That's because it is, or at least your subconscious reads it that way. Here's what most people don't understand. Authentic emotions have temporal dynamics. Real joy doesn't appear instantaneously, it builds. When someone shares good news with you, resist the urge to immediately mirror their excitement. Instead, let your smile emerge over 2 full seconds. Let it start small and grow genuine. Research by Paul Ekman on facial expressions shows that posed emotions have different timing than authentic ones. Instant reactions read as performative because they bypass the neurological processing time that real emotions require. Your brain needs a moment to receive the information, process its meaning, and generate the appropriate emotional response. When you let your reaction build gradually, you're mimicking the exact temporal signature of genuine emotion. The other person's subconscious picks up on this timing and trusts it. You're not faking the emotion. You're allowing it to develop naturally instead of performing it reflexively. This works in reverse too. When you're the one sharing news and someone's face lights up over 2 seconds instead of instantly, you feel truly seen. That's the difference between someone reacting to your words and someone actually receiving what you're saying. 2 seconds. Let it build. That's how real feels. The status oscillation pattern. Every interaction has a status dance happening beneath the words. High status, making statements, holding eye contact longer, taking up space. Low status, asking questions, breaking eye contact first, accommodating physically. Most people get stuck in one mode. They're either always dominating or always deferring, and both create tension. Dominance feels aggressive. Constant deference feels weak. Neither creates the dynamic balance that actual connection requires. Here's the pattern. Oscillate every 2 to 3 minutes. Make a confident statement while holding eye contact. That's high status. Then ask a genuine question and break eye contact naturally. That's low status. Assert an opinion, then seek their perspective. Lead, then follow. Give, then receive. Your subconscious and theirs are constantly tracking status through microbehaviors. Research on social hierarchies shows that fixed status positions create either competitive or submissive dynamics. But oscillation creates collaboration. It signals that you're confident enough to lead and secure enough to follow. This isn't manipulation, it's dance. You're not trying to dominate or submit. You're creating a rhythm where both people get to be powerful and both get to be curious. That rhythm is what trust feels like. Pay attention to your pattern. Are you stuck in one mode? Start oscillating. Watch how the entire energy of the conversation shifts from competition to cooperation. The predictive speaking pause. You can tell when someone is building toward a point. Their words are heading somewhere, constructing an argument or story, and you can see the destination before they arrive. Here's what most people do. They interrupt, or they wait impatiently, planning their response, not actually listening. Both are forms of disconnection. Here's what creates connection. Pause just before they finish. Let them complete their thought. Hold the space for a beat. Then respond. What you're demonstrating is that you're not just hearing words. You're tracking their logic. Your subconscious is following their reasoning in real time. Research on conversational turn-taking shows that well-calibrated gaps signal genuine comprehension. When you interrupt, even with agreement, you're proving you're thinking about what you want to say. When you wait with intention, you're proving you're thinking about what they're saying. The other person feels the difference at a level they can't articulate, but absolutely register. This is especially powerful in disagreements. When someone is building an argument you plan to counter, the predictive pause is devastating. They finish. You pause. Then you respond. That pause says, "I heard you completely, I've considered it fully, and here's my response." It removes any accusation that you weren't listening. It transforms debate into dialogue. The pause is where respect lives. Use it. The effective matching delay. Someone walks in excited, energy at an 8 out of 10. Do you match them immediately at an 8? No. That reads as reactive, possibly fake. Do you stay at your baseline 3? No. That reads as dismissive. Here's the calibration. Match their emotional intensity, but about 20% lower and 3 seconds delayed. They're at an 8, you respond at a 6. They're anxious at a 7, you reflect concern at a 5. And you don't do it instantly. You let 3 seconds pass while you genuinely receive what they're feeling. Research on emotional contagion shows that exact matching feels like mimicry. Instant matching feels like reaction, but slightly dampened. Delayed matching feels like empathy, like you're genuinely feeling with them, not just reflecting back at them. This works because it demonstrates emotional attunement without theatricality. You're resonating with their frequency, but maintaining your own signal. You're in the water with them, but you haven't drowned in it. That's what safety feels like in relationships. Someone who can feel what you feel without being overwhelmed by it. The delay is crucial. Those 3 seconds communicate. I'm taking in what you're expressing. I'm letting it land. Now I'm responding from genuine feeling, not reflex. 20% lower. 3 seconds delayed. That's the frequency of real empathy. The conversational depth gauge. Every conversation has layers, facts, feelings, meanings. Most people skip randomly between them or get stuck at one level, wondering why the conversation feels off. Here's the protocol. Share 3 levels, but only progress deeper when they match your depth. Start with facts. I'm thinking about changing careers. That's surface level, safe, just information. Watch their response. If they engage with curiosity, move to feelings. Honestly, it's terrifying. I've built this identity around what I do. You've gone deeper. If they meet you there with their own vulnerability or genuine interest, go to meaning. I think I've been living someone else's definition of success, and I'm finally ready to find my own. Research on self-disclosure shows that mismatched depth creates discomfort. If you share deep meaning with someone who's still at facts, they'll feel uncomfortable or confused. If they're ready to go deep and you stay shallow, they'll feel rejected or disappointed. This gauge lets you test depth incrementally. You're not dumping your existential crisis on someone who asked how you're doing. You're also not withholding genuine connection from someone who's ready to go there. You're pacing intimacy naturally, responding to their signals. Real connection isn't about how much you share, it's about matching depths. Use the gauge. Let them show you how deep they want to go, then meet them there. The subtle sensory anchoring. You want to be memorable, but not in an obvious way. Here's how. Associate yourself with a distinctive sensory detail. Always carry the same interesting pen. Wear a subtle, distinctive fragrance. Use a particular phrase as your verbal signature. Keep a specific object on your desk. Your subconscious creates powerful associations between people and consistent sensory patterns. This is classical conditioning. Pavlov wasn't just about dogs and bells. Research shows that sensory details create memory anchors far stronger than visual or verbal information alone. Here's what happens. 6 months from now, someone encounters that scent in a completely different context, and you're evoked. Not consciously at first, just a feeling, a sense of familiarity, a positive association they can't quite place. Then they realize, that's the scent you wear. And now they're thinking about you. You're not trying to be gimmicky. You're understanding that memory works through association, and sensory input creates the strongest associative bonds. The pen you use, the subtle fragrance, the way you say, fair enough. These become triggers that bring you to mind. Most people try to be memorable through their words or achievements. You're going to be memorable through their senses, because that's where memory actually lives, not in their thoughts, but in their perceptions. Choose your anchor. Keep it consistent. Let their subconscious do the rest. The non-reactive baseline. Here's a pattern you've probably never noticed. Most people are overreactive. Someone tells a mildly interesting story, and they respond with exaggerated enthusiasm. Someone shares a minor problem, and they flood with sympathy. Every input gets a performance. The problem with constant reactivity is that all your responses become noise. Nothing means anything because everything gets the same amplification. Try this instead. Make neutral expression your default. Not cold, not closed, just calm, present, attentive. Reserve visible reactions for moments that genuinely move you. When something is truly funny, laugh. When something is genuinely concerning, show concern. But stop performing reaction to fill social space. Research on prediction error shows that rare events carry more informational value than common ones. When your reactions are scarce, they become significant. People pay attention because your attention has become valuable. It's not freely distributed to every input. This makes you mysterious in the best way. People can't quite read you, so they pay closer attention. And when you do react, it lands with weight. Your smile means something because it's not automatic. Your concern registers because it's not performative. You're not being cold. You're being intentional. There's a difference between withholding and being selective. Learn it. Your neutral baseline makes your genuine reactions unmistakable. The conversational white space. Silence terrifies most people. They fill every gap with words, noise, anything to avoid the discomfort of quiet. And in doing so, they eliminate the space where depth lives. Try this. Let 10% of conversational space be silence. When someone finishes speaking, don't immediately respond. Sit with what they said. Let it breathe. Let them hear their own words echo in the space. Then speak. Your subconscious interprets constant talk as anxiety or performance. Research on conversational dynamics shows that secure, confident people allow gaps. These pauses do something profound. They force both parties to go deeper. Surface thoughts can't sustain silence. When you let quiet enter, deeper material emerges to fill it. This works both ways. When you're speaking and you pause, you give yourself time to access what you actually think instead of just reacting. When they're speaking and you let silence follow, you give them space to continue beyond their first thought to their real thought. Most conversations never go deep because they never slow down. Everyone's racing from word to word, afraid that silence means disconnection. It doesn't. Silence means digestion. It means respect. It means the conversation matters enough to think about. 10%. That's not much. But watch what grows in that space. Watch how the entire quality of conversation transforms when you're not afraid of quiet. The best things are usually said after a pause. The interest calibration signal. You're in a conversation that's draining you. Maybe it's boring. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you just don't have the bandwidth. But social obligation says you need to stay engaged. Here's the efficiency hack. Lean in slightly while your attention actually drifts. Maintain the posture of engagement, open body language, occasional eye contact, nodding at appropriate moments, while you conserve cognitive resources by letting your mind process other things. Your subconscious can maintain politeness signals without full attentional commitment. Research on attention shows you can engage social autopilot, the parts of your brain that handle conversational maintenance, while your executive function works on something else. This isn't cruel. It's realistic. You cannot give 100% attention to every interaction, or you'll have nothing left for the interactions that actually matter. What you're doing is maintaining the relationship without depleting yourself. The lean-in signals engagement to their subconscious. The actual cognitive drift gives you the rest you need. They feel heard. You stay functional. That's not manipulation. That's sustainable social energy management. Know when to be fully present and when to be strategically present. Both have their place. The assumption generosity. Someone does something that confuses or hurts you. Your first interpretation is probably negative. They're inconsiderate. They don't care. they're selfish. Here's the reframe. Articulate the most generous interpretation possible, out loud, to them. You must have been completely overwhelmed. I imagine you had reasons I'm not seeing. That probably made sense in a context I don't have. Research on attribution theory shows that generous assumptions make people behave better. When you assume the best, you create a reputation effect. They rise to meet your positive interpretation. When you assume the worst, they often fulfill that prophecy too. This isn't naive. It's strategic. You're choosing to create the dynamic where people show you their best rather than their worst. And most of the time, the generous interpretation is closer to truth anyway. People rarely act from malice. They act from overwhelm, confusion, competing priorities, or invisible constraints. Give them the generous assumption, not as a gift to them, but as a gift to yourself. Because living in a world where you assume good intent is significantly more pleasant than living in one where you assume bad faith. The assumption you make shapes the person you meet. Choose wisely. The perspective pyramid. You're trapped in your own head right now, looking at your situation through one lens, your lens. And that singular perspective is probably making everything feel more intense, more personal, more fixed than it actually is. Here's the escape. Force yourself to describe the same situation from 5 different viewpoints. First, your own, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. Second, the other person's perspective. What might they be experiencing? What pressures are they under? Third, a neutral observer watching this like a movie. What would they see without your emotional investment? Fourth, your future self looking back. What will this mean in 5 years? Fifth, someone who loves you unconditionally. What would they want you to understand right now? Your subconscious gets locked into singular perspective because it's cognitively efficient. One viewpoint requires less processing than 5. But research on cognitive reframing shows that multiple perspectives don't just reduce emotional intensity, they increase wisdom. They engage your executive function, pulling you out of reactive mode into reflective mode. When you force the pyramid, something shifts. The situation that felt like a catastrophe from your perspective becomes just a moment from your future self's view. The person who seemed malicious from your angle becomes overwhelmed when you see through theirs. The problem that felt personal becomes just a problem when a neutral observer describes it. You're not denying your perspective. You're refusing to let it be the only perspective. That refusal is where clarity lives. The reframing triad. Something bad just happened. Your subconscious immediately generates a frame. I got rejected. This means I'm not good enough. That frame is sticky. Research on cognitive fixedness shows that the first interpretation you generate tends to dominate all subsequent thinking. Your brain treats that initial frame as truth rather than one possible interpretation among many. Here's the intervention. Immediately generate 3 alternative frames using only the same facts. I got rejected is frame 1. But also, I got data about misalignment, frame 2. I'm one step closer to the right fit, frame 3. I have an opportunity to improve something specific, frame 4. Same event, for different truths. Because here's what most people don't understand. Events don't have inherent meaning. They have the meaning you assign. And the meaning you assign determines everything that happens next. The rejected interpretation leads to withdrawal and self-doubt. The data interpretation leads to analysis and adjustment. The closer to fit interpretation leads to persistence. The opportunity interpretation leads to growth. Research on cognitive flexibility shows that practicing deliberate reframing actually rewires interpretation habits. You're training your brain that one event contains multiple truths simultaneously, and you get to choose which truth you'll live from. This isn't toxic positivity. You're not pretending rejection doesn't hurt. You're refusing to let hurt be the only story. Generate the triad. Watch your options expand. The shrinking horizon technique. You're lying awake, anxious about your career, your relationships, your entire future stretching out like an overwhelming landscape of uncertainty. Your subconscious is trying to solve problems that are 10 years away, and it's failing because it can't. Nobody can solve decade-long problems in a single night of worry. Here's the technique. Repeatedly have the time horizon you're considering. What about my career in 10 years? becomes, what about the next 5 years? Still overwhelming? Have it again. What about this year? Still too much. What about this quarter? This month? This week? Today? Keep shrinking the window until you hit a time frame your subconscious can actually manage. Because here's what research on temporal discounting shows. Your brain is terrible at long-term uncertainty, but excellent at managing the immediate. When you shrink to what about today, suddenly you have answers. Today, you can send that email. Today, you can have that conversation. Today, you can take one step. Your anxiety doesn't disappear, but it becomes actionable. The overwhelming future becomes a manageable present. You're not ignoring long-term planning. You're recognizing that long-term planning happens through short-term action. The 10-year career isn't built through 10-year decisions. It's built through today's decisions, repeated. Shrink the horizon. Find the time frame where your brain can actually function. Start there. The symbolic frame shift. Your subconscious doesn't think in abstract concepts. It thinks in images, metaphors, symbols. When you face a challenge, your brain is already assigning it symbolic meaning whether you realize it or not. The question is, are you choosing the symbol, or is it choosing you? Here's the practice. When facing something difficult, consciously choose a symbol for your approach. You're entering a conflict. What are you? A bridge seeking connection? A sword cutting through to truth? Water flowing around obstacles? A mountain standing immovable? Each symbol activates different behavioral scripts in your unconscious mind. Research on metaphorical thinking shows this isn't just poetic, it's neurological. The bridge symbol primes collaboration and patience. The sword primes directness and clarity. Water primes adaptability. The mountain primes resilience. Choose the symbol that serves your actual goal, not the one that feels emotionally satisfying in the moment. Sometimes you want to be the sword, but the situation needs water. Your conscious choice of symbol gives your unconscious mind a template to follow. This works because your brain is already operating symbolically. You're just usually unconscious of which symbol is running. Making it conscious gives you control. You're the director, not just the actor. The narrative forking. Right now, you have a story about your life. Where you are, how you got here, what it all means. That story feels like truth, but it's not. It's a selection of facts arranged into one possible narrative. Here's the exercise. Write 2 completely different stories about your current situation using only true facts. One tragic, one triumphant. Same facts, opposite meanings. Tragic version. I left my secure job and now I'm struggling financially, questioning everything, watching my friends advance while I'm stuck in uncertainty. Triumphant version. I had the courage to leave security for authenticity. I'm building something meaningful despite obstacles. I'm learning more in this struggle than I did in years of comfort. Both true. Both the same facts. Completely different realities. Research on narrative identity shows that we don't just tell stories about our lives. We live into the stories we construct. The story shapes the reality more than the reality shapes the story. This exercise reveals that truth is a choice of emphasis, not a fixed thing. You're not lying to yourself. You're recognizing that you've been selectively truthful all along, just unconsciously. Now you're choosing which truth serves you. See both versions. Then decide which one you want to live from. The context collapse method. You need to have a difficult conversation with your boss about boundaries. But in your head, it's not just a conversation. It's a referendum on your worth, a potential career-ending conflict, a test of whether you're too demanding or not assertive enough. Hey, stop. Your subconscious has added 17 layers of meaning to what is, behaviorally, very simple. Remove all context and describe only the immediate action required. I need to speak approximately 200 words to another human being. That's it. That's the actual behavior. Everything else, the meaning, the stakes, the implications, is interpretation creating paralysis. Research on cognitive diffusion shows that stripping context removes emotional charge. You're not minimizing the importance. You're separating the action from the interpretation so you can actually take the action. Most paralysis isn't about the behavior itself. It's about the weight of meaning you've attached to the behavior. Speaking 200 words is doable. Having a conversation that will determine my entire professional future is paralyzing. Collapse the context. Find the behavior underneath. Do the behavior. Let the meaning sort itself out afterward. The semantic reframe. Change one word. Change everything. Your subconscious is language dependent. The words you use literally activate different neural networks and recruit different brain regions. I have to go to this meeting versus I get to go to this meeting. Same meeting, different neurology. Have to activates obligation, resentment, constraint. Get to activates choice, opportunity, privilege. I'm stressed about this deadline versus I'm activated about this deadline. Stress implies overwhelm and threat. Activated implies energy and readiness. Your body might feel the same, but the interpretation, and therefore the outcome, changes completely. I failed versus I experimented. Failure is an identity-level judgment. Experiment is a learning-level action. One closes doors, the other opens them. Research on linguistic relativity shows that language doesn't just describe thought, it shapes thought. Word choice changes which brain regions process the experience. This isn't semantics. It's neural programming. Pay attention to your default words. Find the ones that drain you. Swap them for words that serve you. Watch how your experience of reality shifts. The situation doesn't change. Your brain's interpretation of it does. And that interpretation is everything. The dopamine fasting windows. The first thing most people do when they wake up is reach for their phone. Instant stimulation, instant dopamine. And in doing so, they've just set their baseline for the entire day. Here's what's happening. Your dopamine system is calibrating. It's asking, what's the reward threshold in this environment? When you flood it with easy hits first thing, scrolling, notifications, music, even food, you're teaching your reward system that satisfaction comes from stimulus, not effort. Try this instead. Eliminate all sources of easy dopamine for the first 60 minutes after waking. No phone, no music, no food unless you're genuinely hungry, no conversation unless necessary. Just you, awake, present, slightly uncomfortable. Research on dopamine regulation shows that delaying gratification doesn't just build discipline. It raises your baseline dopamine throughout the day. Your brain recalibrates what feels rewarding. Suddenly, the work you need to do feels more satisfying because your reward threshold is lower. Everything becomes more enjoyable because you haven't pre-depleted your capacity for pleasure. This isn't punishment. It's chemistry. You're teaching your internal pharmacy that rewards come from effort, not stimulus. And once that lesson is learned, everything shifts. The boring becomes interesting. The difficult becomes engaging. You're not fighting your dopamine system. You're reprogramming it. 60 minutes. Nothing easy. Watch what happens to the rest of your day. The cortisol pulse training. Most people try to avoid stress entirely. They seek comfort, minimize challenge, eliminate discomfort. And in doing so, they make themselves fragile. Here's the alternative. Deliberately trigger mild stress in the morning, followed by relaxation. Take a cold shower. Do high-intensity exercise for 5 minutes. Hold your breath until uncomfortable. Then rest. Recover. Let your system settle. What you're doing is training your HPA axis, the stress response system. Your subconscious builds resilience through controlled exposure to stressors, not avoidance of them. Research on hormesis shows that acute stress followed by recovery doesn't weaken you. It strengthens your stress response systems. Think of it like a vaccine for stress. You're giving your system a small, manageable dose of challenge so it learns to spike and recover efficiently. When uncontrolled stress hits later, a conflict, a deadline, bad news, your system doesn't spiral. It spikes, handles it, returns to baseline. That's resilience. Most people's stress response is either chronically elevated or catastrophically reactive because it's never been trained. Yours is about to be. Morning stress pulse, followed by recovery. Train the system. Build the capacity. You're not making life harder. You're making yourself stronger for when life gets hard without your permission. The oxytocin priming sequence. You're about to walk into a social situation, a meeting, a date, a difficult conversation. You want to show up warm, open, connected, but you feel guarded, anxious, defensive. Here's the chemical intervention. Spend 2 minutes before the interaction recalling a warm memory, a moment of genuine connection, a time you felt loved or safe. Or if you have access to an animal, pet them for 2 minutes. Stroke a cat. Play with a dog. Feel that warmth. What you're doing is triggering oxytocin release. Your subconscious doesn't distinguish between remembered warmth and present warmth. It releases the same neurochemical either way. Research on oxytocin shows it increases trust, reduces social anxiety, and makes you naturally warmer in interactions. The timing matters. Oxytocin has a 30 to 60-minute half-life. Prime yourself 2 minutes before the interaction, and you walk in chemically predisposed toward connection. You're not faking warmth. You're creating the internal conditions that make warmth natural. This works for difficult conversations too. When you need to set a boundary or deliver hard feedback, oxytocin keeps you connected while you're being direct. You're not cold and clinical. You're warm and honest. That's the sweet spot. 2 minutes. Warm memory or animal contact. Let your internal pharmacy prepare you for connection. The serotonin sunlight protocol. Depression, anxiety, mood instability. Often, we treat these as purely psychological. But sometimes the problem is simpler. You're not getting light. Here's the protocol. Get 10 minutes of direct sunlight within 30 minutes of waking. Outside. No sunglasses. Even on cloudy days, clouds still transmit the wavelengths you need. Your subconscious regulates serotonin production based on light exposure. Research by neuroscientist Andrew Huberman shows that morning light doesn't just wake you up, it sets your entire circadian rhythm, governing mood-regulating neurotransmitters throughout the day. The mechanism is specific. Light hits your retina, signals your suprachiasmatic nucleus, which governs your master clock. That clock controls when serotonin is produced, when melatonin rises, when cortisol peaks. Get the light timing right, and everything downstream synchronizes. Most people wonder why they feel terrible by 3 p.m. Often it's because they never signaled their brain that day has begun. They woke up under artificial light, stayed inside, and their neurochemistry never got the memo that it's daytime. 10 minutes. 30 minutes after waking. Outside. No window, no sunglasses. Let your biology do what it's designed to do. This isn't wellness theater. It's photobiology. Your brain needs the signal. Give it. The GABA activation breath. You're anxious, activated, wired. Your sympathetic nervous system is running the show. You need to calm down, but just relax doesn't work because you can't think your way out of a neurochemical state. Here's the direct intervention. Change your breathing ratio. Inhale for 4 seconds. Exhale for 8 seconds. Keep that 1-to-2 ratio. Exhale twice as long as inhale. What you're doing is directly manipulating your vagus nerve. Extended exhales increase GABA production, the calming neurotransmitter. Research on respiratory vagal nerve stimulation shows this isn't just relaxation technique. It's neurochemical intervention. Your brain reads exhale length as a safety signal. Long exhales mean no threat present. Short, shallow breathing means danger. You're not just feeling calmer. You're chemically producing calm through breath mechanics. This works in real time. 60 seconds of 4 inches, 8-out breathing will shift your state noticeably. 3 minutes will shift it dramatically. You don't need to meditate or visualize or repeat affirmations. You just need to breathe in a pattern that triggers the chemistry you want. Your breath is a remote control for your nervous system. Most people never learn to use it. You just did. 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out. Adjust your chemistry directly. The endorphin conditioning. You want a mood shift tool you can access anywhere, anytime, without anyone noticing. Here's how you build one. Classical conditioning. Choose a specific, unusual gesture. Touch your earlobe in a particular way. Press your thumb and forefinger together. Tap your collarbone twice. Something distinctive, not something you do accidentally. Now, for the next 2 weeks, every time you experience genuine joy, relief, satisfaction, or pleasure, make that gesture. Laughing at something funny, make the gesture. Finishing a hard workout, gesture. Good news arrives, gesture. You're pairing the gesture with the neurochemical state. Your subconscious learns associations through repetition. Research on classical conditioning shows you can anchor endorphin release to voluntary cues. Pavlov's dog salivated to bells. You're going to feel better from a gesture. After 2 weeks of consistent pairing, the gesture itself begins to trigger a mild endorphin response. Not as strong as the original experience, but enough to shift your state when you need it. You're in a stressful meeting. You make your gesture. Your brain releases a small dose of the chemistry associated with joy. You've built a portable mood shift tool that lives in your nervous system. This sounds like magic. It's just neurology. Your brain learns what predicts what. Teach it that the gesture predicts good feelings. Then use the gesture to summon those feelings. Choose your gesture. Start pairing. Build your tool. The retroactive enhancement. Something just happened that you want to remember. A meaningful conversation. A moment of insight. An experience worth preserving. Most people just move on, trusting their brain will hold on to it. It won't, at least not well. Here's the intervention. Immediately after the experience, spend 60 seconds mentally replaying it with enhanced detail. Close your eyes if you can. Run through it again, but slower, richer. What were the specific words said? What did the light look like? What were you feeling in your body? Add texture. Add color. Add sensation. Your subconscious strengthens memories through rehearsal, but there's a critical window. Research on memory consolidation shows the first hour after encoding is when memories move from temporary storage in your hippocampus to permanent storage in your cortex. That transfer isn't automatic. It's strengthened by rehearsal. Deliberate replay within that window makes memories stick. You're not just passively hoping your brain files it correctly. You're actively directing the consolidation process. The memory you want to keep gets priority processing. Most of what you experience today will be forgotten by tomorrow, not because it wasn't important, but because your brain is ruthless about what it keeps. Give it a signal, this matters. Replay it. Enhance it. Make it permanent. 60 seconds. Right after the experience. Your future self will thank you for what you chose to remember. The false memory insertion. Your brain uses past evidence to predict future behavior. It asks, have I done this before? If yes, the action feels possible. If no, it feels foreign, unlikely, difficult. Here's the hack. Create a vivid memory of your future self having already accomplished the goal. Not a fantasy, a memory. Close your eyes and construct it with the same detail as a real memory. Where are you? What are you wearing? Who's congratulating you? What does success feel like in your body? Make it specific. Make it sensory. Make it real. Your subconscious doesn't strongly distinguish between real memories and vividly imagined ones. Research by Daniel Shatter on memory construction shows that imagination and memory use the same neural substrates. The same brain regions light up whether you're remembering or vividly imagining. What you're doing is giving your brain fabricated evidence of success. When you later approach the actual goal, your brain scans for precedent and finds this memory. It doesn't flag it as imagined. It just registers. I've been here before. This is familiar. This is possible. Athletes use this constantly. They visualize the perfect performance so many times that it becomes a pseudo-memory. When game time arrives, their brain treats it as familiar territory rather than unknown threat. You're not lying to yourself. You're speaking your brain's language. It thinks in memories. Give it the memory it needs to make the future feel possible. Construct it vividly. File it as if it already happened. Then watch how much easier the actual doing becomes. The memory decay exploit. There's a memory that haunts you. A moment of humiliation, failure, or pain that replays uninvited. Every time it surfaces, it carries the same emotional punch. You wish you could forget it, but trying to suppress it only makes it stronger. Here's the alternative. Recall it deliberately, but without emotional engagement. Treat it like a news report. Factual, neutral, observational. What happened? Just the facts. No dramatization. No emotional reliving. Just, this occurred, then this, then this. Your subconscious updates memories every time they're accessed. This is the reconsolidation process we talked about earlier. Research shows that emotionless recall weakens emotional associations. You're not erasing the memory, you're editing it, separating the fact from the feeling. This is essentially exposure therapy. The first few recalls might still carry charge, but each neutral replay dilutes the intensity a bit more. Eventually, you're left with factual memory without the emotional devastation. You remember it happened, but it no longer grips you. The memory is already there. It's already affecting you. You might as well be the one who decides how much power it holds. Recall it neutrally, repeatedly. Turn the vivid nightmare into a bland fact. That's not forgetting, that's editing. And you're the editor. The chunking multiplication. Your working memory is limited. You can hold about 4 to 7 items simultaneously. That sounds restrictive until you understand chunks. A chunk isn't just one piece of information. It's a meaningful unit that can contain multiple pieces. A phone number isn't 10 digits. It's 3 chunks: area code, prefix, line number. A sentence isn't individual words. It's a meaningful phrase. Here's the application. When learning new information, group it into meaningful patterns of 3 to 4 items. Don't try to remember 7 random facts. Remember 2 groups of 3 related facts, plus 1 standalone. Your brain treats each group as a single unit. Research by George Miller on chunking shows this dramatically expands effective capacity. You're not increasing your working memory. You're making each slot hold more by organizing information meaningfully. Example: memorizing a list of ingredients becomes the wet ingredients, the dry ingredients, the spices. 3 chunks instead of 12 items. Same information, fraction of the cognitive load. This works because your brain's limitation is on the number of chunks, not the complexity within each chunk. A chess master doesn't remember individual piece positions. They remember strategic patterns. Each pattern is a chunk containing dozens of pieces. Group meaningfully. Create chunks. Watch your capacity multiply. The contextual dependency hack, where you learn affects how you remember. Your subconscious binds memories to environmental context: the room, the sounds, the smells, the physical state you're in. This is state-dependent memory. Here's how to use it strategically. If you need flexible recall, information you'll use in various contexts, study in varied locations. Different rooms, different times, different physical states. This creates context-independent memory. But if you need context-specific recall, like a presentation you'll give in a specific room, study in that room or as close to those conditions as possible. The environment becomes a retrieval cue. Research shows this works both ways. Medical students who study in multiple locations perform better on varied clinical scenarios. Actors who rehearse on the actual stage have better recall during performance. Your memory isn't just stored in your brain. It's partly stored in the environment where you learned it. Return to that environment, and retrieval becomes easier. Learn in varied environments, and retrieval becomes universally accessible. Match your study context to your recall context. If you don't know where you'll need to remember it, learn it everywhere. The sleep learning protocol. You've been studying all day. You're exhausted. You're tempted to scroll through your phone before bed. Decompress. Let your brain rest. Don't. Here's what to do instead. Review the most important material immediately before sleep. Not intensive study, just a quick review. Flip through your notes. Rehearse the key concepts. Remind your brain what matters. Your subconscious consolidates memories during sleep, but it prioritizes recently encoded information. Research on sleep-dependent memory consolidation shows that last input before sleep gets preferential processing during the night. While you sleep, your brain replays the day's experiences, deciding what to keep and what to discard. What you reviewed right before sleep gets marked as important. Your sleeping brain spends more time strengthening those connections, integrating that information, making it permanent. This isn't about studying while you sleep. It's about directing what your sleep processes. You're giving your unconscious brain its assignment for the night. The difference is substantial. Material reviewed before sleep shows significantly better retention than material reviewed earlier in the day. Your sleeping brain is doing the work. You're just telling it what to work on. Last thing before sleep. Quick review. Let your unconscious do the rest. The testing effect multiplier. Stop rereading your notes. Instead, close the book and quiz yourself. Force your brain to pull information from memory without looking. Research by cognitive psychologist Henry Roediger demonstrates that retrieval practice produces 50% better long-term retention compared to simply restudying the same material. Why does this work? Because retrieval is difficult. Your subconscious interprets that difficulty as a signal. This must be important information if we're working this hard to access it. The brain prioritizes effortful learning, treating it as critical data worth preserving. Each time you struggle to remember something and succeed, you're not just recalling, you're rewiring. The generation effect. Don't just answer questions, create them. Write your own examples. Explain concepts in your own words before reading the explanation. Your subconscious remembers self-generated content dramatically better than passively received information. Research on the generation effect shows that when you actively create content rather than consume it, you produce deeper encoding in memory structures. This works because generation forces you to connect new information to what you already know, building multiple retrieval pathways instead of a single fragile connection. The elaborative interrogation. For everything you want to retain, ask yourself 2 questions. Why is this true? And how does this connect to what I already know? Your subconscious creates exponentially stronger memories when information exists in a web of meaning rather than as isolated facts. Research on elaborative encoding proves that meaning-based processing dramatically improves retention. You're not just memorizing, you're integrating. Each connection you build becomes another route to retrieve that information later. The reminiscence bump engineering. Research shows we disproportionately remember experiences from our teens and 20s, periods of intense novelty and identity formation. Your subconscious prioritizes memories from high novelty periods because that's when survival learning was most critical. While you can't return to adolescence, you can engineer artificial bumps at any age. Create periods of intense novelty, travel differently, learn radically new skills, put yourself in identity-challenging situations. Your brain doesn't know the difference between actual youth and engineered transformation. It just knows this period feels significant, so these memories matter. The endowment effect reversal. Before you buy anything significant, try this mental experiment. Imagine you already own it and someone offers to buy it from you. What price would you demand? Your subconscious values things you possess far more than identical things you don't yet own. This is the endowment effect, and Daniel Kahneman's research shows it's not a small quirk. We consistently demand about twice as much to give up something than we'd pay to acquire it. Here's how to use this cognitive exploit strategically. When considering a purchase, close your eyes and visualize owning the item for a month. Now imagine selling it. If your internal selling price is lower than the asking price, that's your subconscious telling you the acquisition isn't worth it. You're catching yourself before buyer's remorse sets in. But this works in reverse too. For investments or opportunities you're hesitating on, imagine you already have them and someone wants to buy them from you. Suddenly that business opportunity or skill-building course feels more valuable. You're hacking your own endowment effect before ownership even occurs. The key is that your subconscious doesn't distinguish between actual ownership and vividly imagined ownership. By pre-installing the psychological sense of possession, you're getting accurate data about whether you truly value something, stripped of the excitement of novelty or the anxiety of loss. The anchoring self-awareness. Walk into any negotiation knowing this. The first number spoken will warp every number that follows. Your subconscious uses anchors as reference points even when you consciously know they're arbitrary. Research on anchoring effects demonstrates something unsettling. Awareness doesn't eliminate the bias. You can know a number is random, know it shouldn't influence you, and still be influenced by it. So here's the strategic play. State an extreme anchor first, then immediately acknowledge its extreme. Example: I know this sounds high, but based on comparable situations, I'd say we're looking at around $50,000 for this project. Now, I recognize that's the upper end. What just happened? You placed the anchor at $50,000. Everything that follows is now evaluated relative to that number. But by acknowledging it's aggressive, you appear reasonable and self-aware. The negotiation doesn't start at zero or their lowball number. It starts at your anchor. and every compromise feels like you're being generous. This works because your subconscious, and theirs, has already coded 50,000 as the reference point. The middle ground has shifted in your favor before actual negotiation begins. Even if you end up at 30,000, that feels like a significant concession from your stated position, when in reality, 30,000 might have been your target all along. Use this on yourself too. When setting goals, anchor high. I want to write 10,000 words this week. Okay, that's ambitious, but even if I hit 6,000, you've just made 6,000 words feel like a compromise rather than a stretch goal. The decoy effect engineering. Your subconscious makes decisions by comparison, not absolute evaluation. This creates an exploitable vulnerability called the asymmetric dominance effect, and once you see it, you'll notice companies using it everywhere. Here's how it works. When presenting options, include a third option that's clearly inferior to your preferred choice, but similar to it in features. Example, you're selling consulting packages. Option A costs $500 for basic service. Option B costs $1,500 for premium service. Most people hesitate. Is premium worth triple the cost? Now add option C. $1,000 for slightly enhanced service, but not as good as B. Suddenly B looks like incredible value. C is worse than B at a similar price point, making B the obvious winner. Your decoy made the decision simple. This works because comparison simplifies cognitive load. When evaluating two options, your subconscious struggles with abstract value assessment. Add a third option that's dominated by one of the original two, and the comparison becomes obvious. The decoy isn't meant to be chosen. It's meant to make your preferred option look superior. Use this in reverse when making your own decisions. If you're stuck between two choices, artificially create a third option that's clearly worse than one of them. Suddenly the decision becomes clear. You're not being manipulated. You're using comparison to cut through your own analysis paralysis. The mental accounting manipulation. Money is fungible. Every economics textbook says so. $1 in your checking account has the same value as $1 in your wallet or $1 labeled vacation fund. But your subconscious doesn't believe this for a second. Richard Thaler's research on mental accounting reveals that we psychologically categorize money into different mental accounts, and we treat each account with different rules. You've experienced this. Finding $20 in an old jacket feels like free money. You'll spend it on something frivolous. But $20 from your paycheck gets treated with more respect. It's the same currency, but different mental accounting. Here's how to exploit this for self-control and goal achievement. Create artificial mental accounts for your money and label them aggressively. Investment capital feels untouchable. Business development fund gets spent differently than entertainment budget. The labels create psychological barriers that willpower alone can't maintain. Want to save more? Open a separate account and label it Financial Freedom Fund. Your subconscious will protect it differently than generic savings. This works in reverse for spending too. If you struggle to invest in yourself, relabel discretionary income as personal development capital. Suddenly that course or coaching feels like deployment of capital rather than an expense. You're using the same money, but the mental accounting shifts how your subconscious evaluates the decision. The peak-end rule design. Your memory is a liar. It doesn't record experiences accurately, it samples them. Daniel Kahneman's research on the peak-end rule demonstrates that your subconscious remembers experiences based on two moments: the most intense point and how it ended. Duration barely matters. This is why a mediocre 3-hour movie feels worse than an intense 90-minute one, or why a painful medical procedure is remembered more favorably if the ending is less intense, even if total pain is higher. Here's the strategic application. Stop trying to optimize average quality. Optimize the peak and the ending. Planning your day? Don't spread energy evenly. Create one remarkable moment and ensure you end on a positive note. Everything in between matters far less than you think to how you'll remember the day. This applies to presentations, dates, projects, even arguments. In a difficult conversation, you can struggle through the middle as long as you create a peak moment of connection and end constructively. That's what will be remembered. In a presentation, your opening matters for attention, But your peak story and closing call to action matter for memory. Use this for self-motivation too. After a workout, end with something you enjoy, a favorite stretch, a victory ritual, whatever creates positive association. Your subconscious will remember the workout more favorably, making the next one easier to start. You're not changing the workout. You're changing how your memory encodes it. The loss aversion leverage. Your subconscious fears loss about twice as much as it values equivalent gains. This asymmetry, documented in prospect theory research, explains why you'll work harder to avoid losing $10 than to gain $10. It's irrational mathematically, but deeply embedded evolutionarily. Our ancestors who feared loss survived. Those who didn't care about loss died. Reframe your self-motivation through loss instead of gain. If I don't exercise today, I'm losing my progress hits harder than if I exercise, I'll gain fitness. By not learning this skill, I'm losing career opportunities motivates more than learning this skill will create opportunities. Same outcome, different framing, dramatically different emotional weight. This works because your subconscious codes losses and gains in separate neural systems. Losses activate threat response regions. Gains activate reward regions. And threat response has evolutionary priority. It's faster, stronger, more attention capturing. By framing an action as loss rather than action as gain, you're borrowing the urgency of your threat response system for positive goals. Be careful with this. Loss framing is powerful, but can create anxiety if overused. Use it for genuine priorities where you need maximum motivation, not for trivial daily tasks. The goal is strategic deployment of your loss aversion, not living in constant fear of missing out. The power pose internalization. Before any high-stakes moment, interview, presentation, difficult conversation, find 2 minutes of privacy and hold an expansive posture. Stand with your feet wide, hands on hips or raised above your head. Hold it for a full 120 seconds. Your subconscious interprets body position as data about your status and confidence level. Yes, Amy Cuddy's original claims about testosterone changes were disputed in replication studies, but the core finding remains solid. Postural feedback affects how you feel and how you perform. This works through proprioceptive feedback, the constant stream of data your brain receives from your muscles, joints, and spatial position. When you occupy more physical space, your brain infers that you must be confident and high status. Why else would you take up space? The causality runs backward. You're not confident, therefore expansive. You're expansive, therefore your brain codes you as confident. This isn't about fooling others. This is about sending your own nervous system accurate data about the situation. You belong here. You're capable. You're ready. The micro-expression training. Stand in front of a mirror and deliberately make facial expressions. Smile broadly for 30 seconds. Furrow your brow in concern. Raise your eyebrows in surprise. Then notice what happens internally. Your subconscious experiences emotions partly through facial feedback. Your brain reads your own facial muscles as emotional data. Research on the facial feedback hypothesis shows that forcing a smile does increase positive effect, though the effect size is smaller than early studies suggested. But here's what matters. The loop is bidirectional. Anxiety creates furrowed brows, but furrowed brows also create anxiety. Your brain can't always tell whether the expression came from the emotion or created it. Use this deliberately. When you need to shift your internal state, adjust your face first. Soften your forehead. Relax your eyes. Let the corners of your mouth lift slightly. You're not faking happiness. You're sending your brain the physical signals that accompany the state you want to access. The temperature manipulation. Physical temperature and psychological temperature are linked in your subconscious through embodied cognition. Research by John Barg demonstrated that holding a warm cup of coffee makes people judge others as more interpersonally warm. Cold exposure increases norepinephrine, sharpening alertness and focus. Your body uses temperature as metaphorical data. Deploy this strategically. Cold shower before you need peak performance and alertness. The shock activates your sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight mode, but channeled into focus. Warmth before situations requiring trust and openness, difficult conversations, collaborative meetings, emotional connection. Warm tea, warm room, warm clothing. Your nervous system interprets warmth as safety, lowering defensive barriers. This isn't placebo. It's your body's ancient association between temperature and survival conditions affecting your psychological state. The postural power switching. Set a timer for every 30 minutes and consciously change your posture. Your subconscious gets trapped in physical patterns that reinforce mental patterns. Research on embodied cognition consistently shows that slumped posture increases feelings of helplessness and negative thinking. But it's not just about sitting up straight. It's about preventing postural stagnation. Every sustained position becomes a mental cage. Sitting hunched over a laptop for 2 hours doesn't just hurt your back. It trains your nervous system that you're small, defensive, overwhelmed. Regular postural resets prevent this psychological accumulation. Stand, stretch, reconfigure your body in space. Each physical reset creates a psychological refresh. You're essentially rebooting your psychophysiological operating system before it crashes. The tactile grounding. When anxiety spirals or rumination loops begin, immediately shift attention to physical texture. Rub fabric between your fingers. Hold an ice cube. Trace the grain of wood. Press your feet into the floor and notice the pressure. Your subconscious has limited attentional bandwidth. Tactile focus competes directly with rumination for processing resources. Research on sensory grounding techniques shows this reduces anxiety by activating sensory processing regions at the expense of self-referential thought networks. When you're lost in anxious thoughts about the future or regrets about the past, detailed sensory attention pulls you forcefully into the present moment. This works because your brain can't simultaneously run high-resolution sensory processing and high-resolution worry. By commanding attention to texture, temperature, and pressure, you're interrupting the worry loop not through willpower, but through neurological competition. The jaw tension release. Multiple times throughout your day, pause and notice your jaw. Is it clenched? Most people hold chronic tension in their jaw without realizing it. Your subconscious stores stress in the jaw. It's the strongest muscle pound for pound in your body and evolutionarily linked to the fight response. Research on progressive muscle relaxation demonstrates that jaw release has disproportionate calming effects compared to other muscle groups. This works because jaw tension signals threat status to your autonomic nervous system. When the jaw is tight, your body interprets this as preparation for conflict. Releasing it sends the opposite signal: safety, no immediate threat, permission to relax. Consciously drop your jaw slightly. Let your tongue rest on the floor of your mouth. Feel the tension dissolve. You've just sent your nervous system a safety notification, and it will adjust your entire physiological state accordingly. The gaze pattern shift. Your eyes do more than see. They signal to your brain what cognitive mode to enter. Use a soft, defocused gaze for creativity and relaxation. Let your eyes rest on a point, but allow peripheral vision to dominate. Your subconscious interprets this as scanning for broad patterns, which correlates with relaxed, creative states. For analytical work, shift to a hard, focused gaze. Narrow your attention to a single point, engaging your eye muscles deliberately. Research on attentional states shows that peripheral vision access correlates with divergent thinking and relaxed nervous system states, while focused vision correlates with convergent, analytical thinking. This isn't just correlation. You can use gaze to deliberately trigger these states. Before brainstorming, soften your gaze and look into the middle distance. Before detailed analysis, sharpen your focus on your screen or document. Your visual system is the most dominant sensory input to your brain, and how you direct it shapes what cognitive resources become available. The heart rate variability training. Practice rhythmic breathing that increases heart rate variability. Inhale for 5 seconds, exhale for 5 seconds, maintaining a relaxed, smooth rhythm. Your subconscious uses HRV, the variation in time between heartbeats, as a key indicator of stress resilience and autonomic nervous system health. Research consistently shows that high HRV correlates with better emotional regulation, decision-making, and stress recovery. This works because rhythmic breathing at approximately 6 breaths per minute creates coherence between your heart rhythm and brain activity, optimizing autonomic nervous system balance. You're literally synchronizing the communication between your heart and prefrontal cortex. When your heart rhythm is chaotic and irregular, your brain interprets this as a stress signal. When it's variable but rhythmic, your brain codes this as calm alertness, the optimal state for performance. 5 minutes of this breathing before important moments recalibrates your entire nervous system. The vocal tone modulation. Your voice reveals and shapes your psychological state. Lower your vocal pitch slightly when you need to project authority or calm confidence. Raise it slightly when seeking connection or expressing enthusiasm. Your subconscious, and the subconscious of everyone listening, interprets pitch as status and threat data. Research on vocal acoustics shows that lower frequencies are universally perceived as more dominant, while higher frequencies signal approachability. This works because your vocal cords are under voluntary control. Unlike many autonomic processes, you can directly adjust the signal you're broadcasting. Before speaking in high-stakes situations, take a breath deep into your belly and speak from there rather than your throat. The resonance drops naturally. You're not faking authority. You're accessing the vocal register that your nervous system associates with groundedness. Conversely, when building rapport or expressing warmth, allow your pitch to rise naturally at the end of statements, creating prosodic warmth that others unconsciously register as safe and open. The movement thought pairing. Associate specific movements with specific mental states and use them as triggers. Walking for brainstorming and problem solving. Sitting still with upright posture for focused concentration. Lying down for imaginative visualization. Your subconscious learns to enter cognitive states based on physical position through repeated association. Research on context-dependent memory shows that physical state can powerfully trigger associated cognitive states. This works through classical conditioning. By consistently pairing a body position with a type of thinking, you create an automatic entry point to that state. When you're stuck on a problem, stand up and walk. The change in physical state gives your brain permission to think differently. When you need deep focus, return to your designated focus position. Your body becomes a menu of mental states, and you can navigate it deliberately by changing position. The mistake celebration protocol. When you make a mistake, your immediate reaction determines whether your brain codes it as a learning opportunity or an identity threat. Most people's subconscious response is self-criticism. I'm stupid, or I always mess this up. This triggers shame circuits that shut down the prefrontal cortex, the exact region you need for learning. Instead, pause and say out loud, "That's interesting." This simple phrase reframes the error as data rather than failure. Research on growth mindset by Carol Dweck shows that emotional response to errors is the single biggest predictor of whether you'll learn from them. When you approach mistakes with curiosity, your brain stays in an exploratory state. Dopamine pathways remain active, attention stays engaged, and the error becomes a teaching signal. When you approach mistakes with shame, your amygdala activates threat responses, flooding your system with cortisol and shutting down the very neural networks required for adaptation. You're training your subconscious to either seek out challenges or avoid them based entirely on how you narrate your failures. The difficulty sweet spot. Your subconscious learns optimally at approximately 85% success rate. Not easier, not harder. Research by Robert Bjork on desirable difficulties reveals that tasks producing about 15% errors maximize learning velocity. If you're succeeding at everything, the challenge is insufficient. There's no error signal to drive neural adaptation. If you're failing more than 20% of the time, the difficulty overwhelms your cognitive resources, triggering frustration and learned helplessness. This works because learning requires error correction. Your brain compares predicted outcomes to actual outcomes, and the mismatch drives plasticity. Too little mismatch means nothing to correct. Too much mismatch means the signal is noise. Your brain can't extract useful patterns from chaos. Find the edge where you're succeeding most of the time, but failing just enough to stay challenged. That narrow band is where neural growth happens fastest. The explanation pre-testing. Before studying new material, attempt to explain it based purely on what you already know. This feels backward. How can you explain something you haven't learned yet? But your subconscious learns dramatically better when it first recognizes its own knowledge gaps. Research on pre-testing effects shows that attempting to answer questions before instruction improves retention by up to 40% compared to passive study. This works through several mechanisms. First, it activates existing neural networks related to the topic, priming those pathways for new information. Second, it creates specific slots where knowledge is missing. Your brain now has explicit questions that need answers. Third, it generates prediction errors when you discover your explanations were wrong, and prediction errors are the brain's primary learning signal. You're essentially creating cognitive demand before supplying the answer, making the answer far more sticky when it arrives. The analogical encoding. When learning concept A, immediately learn a structurally similar concept B from a completely different domain. Your subconscious extracts deeper principles when forced to identify patterns across contexts. Research by Dedrick Gentner on analogical reasoning shows that comparing across domains creates schema-level understanding rather than surface-level memorization. Example, learning about electrical circuits and water pipe systems simultaneously. Voltage is like water pressure, current is like flow rate, resistance is like pipe diameter. By mapping the structure across domains, you're forcing your brain to identify the abstract relationships rather than memorizing specific facts. This works because schema-level knowledge transfers across contexts. You haven't just learned circuits, you've learned about flow systems generally. Most people learn one thing at a time in isolation. By learning two analogous things simultaneously, you're building transferable mental models instead of context-locked information. The metacognitive wrap. After every learning session, spend exactly 2 minutes writing 3 things. What did I learn? What do I still not understand? What surprised me? Your subconscious doesn't automatically consolidate learning without deliberate reflection. Research on metacognition shows that this brief reflection period dramatically increases both retention and transfer to new contexts. This works by forcing conscious processing of what was encountered. Without reflection, learning remains in episodic memory. You remember the experience of studying, but not the content itself. Reflection moves information into semantic memory, abstracted knowledge detached from the learning context. The "what surprised me" question is particularly powerful because surprise indicates prediction error, and explicitly noting it strengthens the correction your brain made to its models. The variability injection. Practice the same skill under varying conditions, different times of day, different locations, different energy states, different methods. Your subconscious builds robust, transferable skills through variability, not through repetition of identical conditions. Research on motor learning and contextual interference shows that variable practice produces better long-term retention and transfer than constant practice, even though it feels less efficient during training. This works because variability prevents overfitting. When you practice the same skill in the same context repeatedly, your brain doesn't learn the skill. It learns how to perform this skill in this specific context. The skill becomes brittle, dependent on environmental cues that won't be present when you need it elsewhere. Variability forces your brain to extract the essential elements of the skill that work across contexts, creating truly generalizable competence. The cognitive load management. Break complex material into small components. Master each component fully until it's automatic, then combine them. Your subconscious has severely limited working memory capacity. Research suggests 4 to 7 items maximum. Cognitive load theory, developed by John Sweller, shows that exceeding working memory capacity doesn't just slow learning, it prevents it entirely. This works because automated subskills don't consume working memory. When you're learning to drive, steering, accelerating, and watching mirrors simultaneously overwhelms your capacity. But once steering becomes automatic, it frees working memory for other tasks. The strategy: isolate components, drill them to automaticity, then integrate. Complex skills aren't learned whole, They're assembled from automated parts. The self-testing frequency. Test yourself on new information within 24 hours, then 3 days later, then 1 week later, then 1 month later. Your subconscious prioritizes information that's repeatedly retrieved at expanding intervals. Research on the testing effect shows that retrieval practice produces dramatically better retention than restudying the same material. This works because retrieval is effortful, and effort signals importance to your brain. Each time you successfully pull information from memory, you're strengthening that neural pathway. The expanding intervals exploit the forgetting curve. You're testing right before you would forget, maximizing the learning benefit of each retrieval attempt. The error prediction training. Before attempting any new task or skill, take 60 seconds to predict specifically where you'll likely make mistakes. Write them down. I'll probably rush the third step, or I tend to forget to check my work at the end. Your subconscious becomes dramatically more accurate at real-time error detection when it practices prediction first. Research on metacognitive calibration shows that people who explicitly predict their errors before performing a task are significantly better at recognizing and correcting those errors as they occur. This works by priming your error detection systems. Your brain has sophisticated monitoring circuits that scan for mistakes, but they need to know what to look for. When you predict errors in advance, you're essentially programming your internal quality control system with specific patterns to watch for. During execution, these primed patterns become highly salient. You notice them the moment they start to emerge rather than after they've already caused problems. This is why expert performers do mental rehearsals that include anticipated difficulties, not just smooth execution. They're training their monitoring systems to be vigilant for specific failure modes. The key is specificity. I'll probably mess up doesn't help. I'll probably lose focus during the middle section and skip a step. Gives your brain actionable surveillance instructions. You're not being pessimistic. You're being strategically prepared. The multi-sensory encoding. When learning anything important, engage multiple sensory and motor systems simultaneously. Say the information aloud while writing it by hand. Draw visual representations while explaining verbally. Walk around your room while thinking through concepts. Your subconscious creates multiple independent retrieval pathways through multisensory encoding, and each pathway increases the probability you'll be able to access that information later. Research on dual coding theory, developed by Alan Pivio, demonstrates that verbal and visual encoding together produce substantially better retention than either modality alone. But the principle extends beyond just visual and verbal. Motor encoding, the physical act of writing or gesturing, creates additional memory traces in motor cortex. Spatial encoding, associating information with locations as you move, leverages the brain's powerful spatial memory systems. Auditory encoding through speaking aloud adds yet another pathway. This works because memory isn't stored in one location. It's distributed across the specific neural networks involved in processing it. When you only read information silently, you're creating a single retrieval pathway through visual processing regions. But when you read it, say it aloud, write it by hand, and draw a diagram, you're creating 4 independent routes to the same information. If one pathway fails during retrieval, you have 3 backups. More importantly, activating multiple pathways simultaneously creates associations between them, so triggering one makes the others more accessible. The practical application. Stop being passive with information. If you're learning something that matters, get physical with it. Write it, speak it, draw it, move while thinking about it. Each modality you add is another insurance policy on that memory. The novelty injection. Every 25 minutes during focused work, change exactly one environmental variable. Adjust the lighting, brighter or dimmer. Shift your physical position. Stand if you were sitting, move to a different chair. Alter the temperature, open a window, adjust the thermostat. Change the ambient sound, add music, remove it, switch genres. Your subconscious maintains attention better with periodic novelty than with static conditions. Research on attention spans shows that environmental monotony accelerates mental fatigue independent of the actual cognitive difficulty of your work. This works because novelty triggers a mild, orienting response. Your brain briefly notices the change, which resets your attention systems without fully disrupting your focus. You're essentially giving your attentional networks a micro-refresh. The key is subtlety. Dramatic changes break flow state, but small environmental shifts prevent the gradual attention decay that comes from unchanging sensory input. Think of it as clearing the mental cache without closing the program. The background cognitive load. For mundane, repetitive tasks that require minimal cognitive effort, deliberately add mild background cognitive load. Listen to a podcast in a language you don't speak fluently. Do simple mental math while filing paperwork. Play instrumental music with complex arrangements during data entry. Your subconscious actually performs boring tasks better when it has something else to partially process simultaneously. Research on the Yerkes-Dodson law demonstrates that optimal arousal varies by task difficulty. For complex tasks requiring full cognitive resources, any distraction degrades performance. But for simple, understimulating tasks, your brain needs additional arousal to maintain alertness and prevent boredom-induced errors. This works by keeping your overall activation level high enough to stay engaged. Without additional stimulation during boring work, your mind wanders toward more interesting thoughts, and errors accumulate. The background load keeps you present without overwhelming the primary task. The attention residue cleanse. Between different types of tasks, do 30 jumping jacks or walk up and down stairs for 2 minutes. Your subconscious maintains partial attention on previous tasks even after you've consciously moved on. This is called attention residue. Research by Sophie Leroy shows that physical movement clears attention residue far more effectively than mental effort alone. This works because physical activity forces a neurological reset. When you transition from one cognitive task to another without a physical break, parts of your brain remain activated in the previous task's neural configuration. It's like having multiple browser tabs open. Even the inactive ones consume resources. Physical movement doesn't just distract you from the previous task. It actively clears your mental workspace by shifting blood flow, changing neurochemical states, and forcing your brain to coordinate movement rather than maintain thought patterns. The workspace gets wiped clean, allowing full cognitive commitment to the next task. The ultradian rhythm alignment. Structure your work in 90-minute cycles followed by 20-minute breaks. Your subconscious operates on ultradian rhythms, 90 to 120-minute cycles of heightened and reduced alertness that occur throughout the day, independent of your circadian rhythm. Research on BRAC, the basic rest activity cycle, shows that performance naturally oscillates in these intervals. Fighting this biological rhythm by trying to maintain constant output for hours depletes your cognitive resources faster and produces diminishing returns. This works by synchronizing your work structure with your brain's natural energy cycles. During the 90-minute work period, you're riding the wave of your ultradian peak. During the 20-minute break, you're respecting the natural trough that follows. Most people try to push through the trough with caffeine and willpower, which works temporarily but accumulates fatigue. Respecting the rhythm maintains sustainable high performance across the entire day. The attention tracking. Set a random timer that goes off at unpredictable intervals between 10 and 30 minutes. When it rings, immediately note what you were thinking about. Was your attention on your intended task, or had it wandered? Your subconscious mind wanders approximately 47% of the time, according to Harvard research by Matt Killingsworth using real-time experience sampling. Most people have no idea how often their attention drifts or what patterns govern that drift. Tracking makes unconscious wandering conscious, giving you data to identify patterns. What time of day does your attention drift most? What types of tasks lose you fastest? What environmental factors correlate with sustained focus versus wandering? This works by converting invisible attention patterns into visible data. Once you can see the patterns, you can engineer around them, scheduling demanding work during your naturally focused windows and protecting those times from interruption. The single sensory blocking. Deliberately block one sensory channel to enhance processing in another. Use earplugs or noise-canceling headphones for visual work like reading, design, or analysis. Use an eye mask or work in darkness for auditory work like listening to lectures, music analysis, or audio editing. Your subconscious has finite sensory processing capacity distributed across modalities. Research on cross-modal attention shows that reducing input in one sensory channel enhances processing capacity in others. This works because your brain's attentional resources are shared across senses. Vision, hearing, touch all compete for the same limited pool. By eliminating competing signals from irrelevant senses, you're allowing full attentional commitment to the relevant sense. This isn't just about reducing distraction. It's about reallocating processing power. When you block auditory input during reading, you're not just removing noise. You're freeing up auditory processing regions to support visual processing through cross-modal reinforcement. The preload priming. Before deep reading or learning, spend 5 minutes reading a summary, outline, or table of contents. Your subconscious builds better mental models when it has advanced organizers, conceptual frameworks that preview what's coming. Research by David Ozabel on advanced organizers shows that providing conceptual structure before detailed content improves both comprehension and retention significantly. This works because your brain processes information more efficiently when it knows what to look for and where things fit. Without a preview, you're trying to build structure and absorb content simultaneously, which overloads working memory. With a preview, the structure is already in place. You're just filling in details. It's the difference between assembling furniture with instructions versus without them. The pieces are the same, but having the framework makes assembly exponentially easier. The attention budget. Every morning, decide your top 3 attention priorities. Everything else is explicitly secondary. Your subconscious cannot maintain vigilance across unlimited domains simultaneously. Research on ego depletion and decision fatigue confirms that attention is genuinely limited. It's your scarcest resource, not time. This works by explicitly rationing attention rather than letting it diffuse across every possible demand. When everything is a priority, nothing receives adequate focus. By declaring 3 domains worthy of full attention and consciously relegating everything else to background status, you're giving yourself permission to ignore the secondary items without guilt. This isn't about working harder. It's about concentrating finite resources on what matters most rather than spreading them thin across everything that seems urgent. The context switching penalty. Batch similar tasks together to minimize context switches. Your subconscious pays a significant cognitive switching tax every time you change task types. Research shows that context switching can cost 20 to 40% of your productive time, not from the tasks themselves, but from the mental reload time required each time you shift cognitive modes. This works because keeping related neural networks activated is far more efficient than repeatedly deactivating and reactivating different networks. When you answer emails, then write code, then review a document, then return to emails, your brain must load and unload entirely different cognitive configurations each time. Writing activates creative language networks. Coding activates logical problem-solving systems. Document review activates critical evaluation circuits. Each switch requires your brain to save the current state, clear working memory, and load a new configuration. Instead, batch all email responses into one block. Group all creative writing into another. Consolidate all analytical review into a third. Your brain stays in email mode, or writing mode, or analysis mode for extended periods, avoiding the expensive reload process. This isn't just about efficiency, it's about preserving cognitive resources. Each context switch depletes your mental energy faster than the actual work does. By batching, you're doing the same amount of work while paying the switching tax far fewer times. The distraction premortem. Before beginning any focused work session, spend 2 minutes listing your 3 most likely distractions and planning specific countermeasures for each. Your subconscious handles distractions far more effectively when it has pre-planned responses rather than trying to decide in the moment. Research on implementation intentions shows that if-then planning for obstacles dramatically improves goal achievement. This works by creating automated responses to predictable attention thieves. When you plan, if I feel the urge to check my phone, then I will write down what I'm thinking about first. You're programming a circuit breaker into your distraction pattern. The urge will still arise, but instead of automatically following it, your brain executes the pre-planned response. Be specific about your 3 distractions. Don't just write phone. Write the urge to check messages when I hit a difficult section. Don't write noise. Write, if someone interrupts me, I will ask them to come back in 30 minutes. The specificity matters because vague plans require real-time decision-making, which depletes willpower. Specific if-then plans bypass decision-making entirely. They're automatic execution of a preloaded script. This transforms distraction management from a willpower battle into an engineering problem. You're not trying to be stronger than your distractions. You're anticipating them and building circuit breakers that trigger automatically. Most people lose focus battles because they're fighting them in real time with depleted resources. You're winning them in advance when your cognitive resources are still fresh. The mortality meditation. You're going to die. Not eventually, not theoretically, actually. Your consciousness will end. Everything you're building, everyone you know, every worry consuming you right now will be irrelevant when that moment comes. Most people avoid this thought. It's uncomfortable, morbid, depressing. But that avoidance is precisely what keeps them trapped in lives that don't matter to them, pursuing goals they don't actually care about, afraid of judgments that won't mean anything when it's over. Here's the practice. Once a week, vividly imagine your death. Not in a fearful way, in a clarifying way. Close your eyes. You're at the end, looking back at the life you lived. What mattered? What didn't? What do you wish you'd done? What do you wish you'd stopped caring about? Then work backward. If that future self could send one message to your present self, what would it be? What would they tell you to prioritize? What would they tell you to stop wasting energy on? Your subconscious clarifies priorities when confronted with finitude. Research on terror management theory shows that mortality salience can trigger either defense mechanisms or authentic value clarification. It depends on how you frame it. Frame it as clarifying, not threatening, and something profound happens. All the social expectations, the comparisons, the fears of what people think, they evaporate when you truly internalize that this is temporary. What remains is what actually matters to you beneath all the noise. This isn't morbid. It's the opposite. It's using the one guaranteed truth, that this ends, to figure out what to do with the time before it does. Most people sleepwalk through life, avoiding the thought of death, and therefore never truly choosing how to live. You're going to do the opposite. Face the end clearly, then let that clarity dictate the middle. Weekly practice. Imagine the end. Work backward. Let mortality be your compass, not your terror. The legacy projection. Here's a different angle on the same truth. You will be remembered, if at all, for a very short time after you die. Maybe a generation. Maybe 2 if you're lucky. Then you'll be a name on a family tree, a story that gets vaguer with each telling, then nothing. That could be depressing, or it could be liberating. Write your own eulogy as you want it to be. Not as it is, as it could be. If you lived fully into your values, if you became the person you're capable of becoming, what would people say about you? Not about your achievements, about who you were, how you made people feel, what you stood for, what you gave. Be specific. Use real words. They'll say I was someone who showed up for people even when it was inconvenient. Someone who told the truth even when it cost something. Someone who created space for others to be themselves. Now look at the gap between that eulogy and your current trajectory. That gap is your work. That's what you're here to close. Research on possible selves shows that vivid future identity representations drive current behavior more powerfully than abstract goals. You're not just setting goals, you're constructing an identity to grow into. Your subconscious is motivated by identity-level aspirations, not task-level ones. Write every day is a task. Become someone who was known for telling stories that mattered is an identity. The identity pulls you forward. The task just sits on a list. Write the eulogy. Feel the gap. Let that gap become the organizing principle for your choices. Not all of them. You're not going to be perfect, but enough of them that the trajectory starts bending toward the person you wrote about. You get to decide what you'll be remembered for, if only by deciding who you're going to be while you're here. The arbitrary meaning assignment. You have to do something you don't want to do, a meeting you dread, a task that feels pointless, an obligation that drains you. You can't escape it, so you're just enduring it, resenting every minute. Here's the reframe. Deliberately assign it deep personal meaning, even if that meaning is completely arbitrary, even if you're making it up. This meeting is where I practice staying centered when chaos surrounds me. This is my training ground for equanimity. This tedious task is where I practice excellence in things no one will notice. This is how I build character when no one's watching. This obligation is where I learn to give without resentment. This is my generosity practice. Your subconscious performs better with why, even if the why is invented. Research on self-determination theory shows that autonomous motivation, internal reasons, outperforms controlled motivation even when the external requirement is identical. You're not lying to yourself. You're recognizing that meaning isn't inherent, it's assigned. Nothing has intrinsic meaning. Everything has the meaning you give it. Most people let meaning happen to them, determined by external judgment or social expectation. You're going to assign it deliberately. The task doesn't change. Your relationship to it does. And that relationship determines whether it depletes you or develops you. This isn't toxic positivity. You're not pretending that meaningless things are meaningful. You're recognizing that you're the one who decides what's meaningless. Might as well make it mean something that serves you. Choose your meaning. Assign it boldly. Transform obligation into opportunity through nothing but interpretation. The Zoom oscillation. You're stuck in your head, overwhelmed by the importance of everything. Every decision feels monumental. Every setback feels catastrophic. Everything matters so much that you're paralyzed by the weight of it all. Here's the perspective shift. Zoom out to cosmic scale. You're on a rock spinning through space, one of billions of organisms that have lived and died on this planet. In a universe so vast that your entire civilization is less than a speck. Nothing you do matters. Nothing anyone does matters. It's all dust and time and eventual heat death. Feel that. Really feel the insignificance. Let it wash over you. Everything you're worried about, meaningless. Everyone judging you, irrelevant. Your entire life, cosmically speaking, is a blip so small it might as well not exist. Now zoom back in. To today. To this moment, to the person in front of you, to the work in your hands. At this scale, everything matters. The kindness you show, the effort you make, the truth you tell or don't tell. Right now, to the people in your immediate sphere, your choices matter enormously. Your subconscious gets trapped in single-scale thinking. Research on construal level theory shows that psychological distance, temporal, spatial, social, changes decision-making. You need both perspectives, not alternating randomly, but deliberately oscillating. Zoom out when you're paralyzed by importance. Nothing matters. Zoom in when you're paralyzed by meaninglessness. Everything matters. The truth is somewhere in the oscillation. Your life is both utterly insignificant and profoundly important, depending on the scale you're viewing it from. Neither perspective alone is sufficient. You need both. Practice the zoom. Out to insignificance when you're drowning in importance. Into meaning when you're lost in meaninglessness. The movement between them is where you find balance. The contribution tracking. You do good work. You help people. You contribute value. But your brain doesn't register it. It focuses on what went wrong, what you didn't do, where you fell short. That's negativity bias. Evolution wired you to obsess over threats and mistakes because that kept you alive. But it's also killing your motivation. Because when contribution feels invisible, meaningless, you lose the drive to contribute. Here's the intervention. Document how your work has contributed to others' lives. Save every email where someone says thank you. Screenshot messages of appreciation. Keep a folder of moments where what you did mattered to someone else. When motivation wanes, when you're questioning whether any of this matters, open that folder. Read the evidence. Your subconscious needs proof of impact to sustain motivation. Research on pro-social motivation shows that visible impact dramatically increases engagement and satisfaction. It's not about ego, it's about evidence. Your brain needs data that what you're doing creates value beyond yourself. Most impact is invisible to you. The email you sent that helped someone make a decision. The conversation that shifted someone's thinking. The work that solved a problem someone else didn't have to face. You never see most of it, but some of it surfaces. When it does, capture it. Because on the hard days, and there will be hard days, that evidence is what reminds you why you're doing this. You're not collecting praise for vanity. You're collecting evidence for resilience. There's a difference. Start the folder. Feed it. Let it feed you when you need it. The values hierarchy clarity. You have values. Probably several. Honesty, kindness, ambition, loyalty, creativity, security, freedom, family, impact, growth. They all matter to you. But here's the problem. They conflict. Constantly. Ambition versus family time. Honesty versus kindness. Security versus freedom. When these conflicts arise, you agonize. You feel torn. You make the decision situationally, then second-guess it for days. Here's the solution. Rank your top 5 values in order. Actually write them down, numbered 1 through 5. This is your hierarchy. When they conflict, and they will, you know which wins. Your subconscious experiences distress when values compete without resolution. Research on values clarification shows that explicit hierarchies reduce decision anxiety. You're not eliminating the conflict, you're pre-deciding how to resolve it. Example, if freedom is number 1 and security is number 3, and a decision forces you to choose, you choose freedom. Not because security doesn't matter, but because you've already decided which matters more to you. This doesn't make decisions easy. It makes them clear. There's a difference. Most people avoid ranking values because it feels limiting, like they're saying some values don't matter. But that's not what you're doing. You're saying, when I can only honor one, this is the one I'll honor. Everything else is secondary by definition. You can't live by 10 competing values simultaneously. Rank them, 1 through 5. Let that hierarchy be your decision filter. Watch how much mental energy you reclaim from decisions that previously paralyzed you. The hedonic adaptation counter. You worked hard for something. You finally got it. The promotion, the relationship, the achievement, the thing you thought would change everything. And for about 3 weeks, it did. You felt genuinely happier. Then you adapted. The new normal became normal. The happiness faded. You're back to baseline, wondering why nothing ever satisfies you for long. That's hedonic adaptation, the hedonic treadmill. Research shows this is nearly universal. You adapt to improvements, returning happiness to baseline, which means you're always chasing the next thing, assuming it will be different. It won't. Here's the counter. Regularly reset to baseline. Once a month, remove comforts intentionally. Sleep on the floor. Eat plain food. Wear simple clothes. Take a cold shower. Spend a day without your phone. Remove the thing you've adapted to. Your subconscious stops appreciating what it has constant access to. Temporary removal makes return feel like gain rather than baseline. You're artificially recreating the contrast that makes appreciation possible. This isn't asceticism or self-punishment. It's recalibrating your baseline so that your actual life feels abundant rather than neutral. The coffee you have every morning stops registering as pleasure. It's just morning. Go without it for 3 days, then have it again. Suddenly it's a gift, not a routine. Your comfortable bed disappears into background. Sleep on the floor for 1 night. Your bed becomes luxury again. Most people try to solve hedonic adaptation by acquiring more. You're going to solve it by temporarily having less. The reset makes what you have feel new again. Monthly practice. Remove something. Let absence create appreciation. Then return and actually enjoy what you already have. The present moment anchoring. You're always somewhere else. Planning the future, replaying the past, imagining scenarios that haven't happened and probably won't. Meanwhile, your actual life, the only one you have, is happening right now, and you're not in it. Here's the anchor. Several times daily, pause and note 3 things you're grateful for right now. Not generally, specifically in this moment. Not, I'm grateful for my health. That's abstract. I'm grateful for the warmth of this coffee in my hands, for the fact that my body doesn't hurt right now, for the quiet in this room. Your subconscious projects happiness into future conditions. I'll be happy when. But research on gratitude interventions shows that specificity matters more than frequency. One genuinely present moment of appreciation does more than 10 abstract ones. This works by training attention toward what's working rather than what's missing, not as denial of problems, but as counterbalance to your brain's default negativity bias. Most suffering isn't about what's actually happening. It's about what you're thinking about while it's happening. You're physically safe, but mentally replaying a conflict from yesterday or rehearsing anxiety about tomorrow. The present moment is actually fine. You're just not in it. 3 times daily. 3 things. Right now? Specific. Physical. Present. This isn't gratitude as performance. It's attention training. You're teaching your brain to actually be where you are. The energy audit. You do things because you're supposed to, because they're good for you, because everyone says they're important. But you feel drained constantly, and you can't figure out why. Here's why. You're not tracking what actually energizes versus depletes you. You're following social scripts about what should be good for you rather than what actually is. Do this. For 2 weeks, track everything. After each activity, note, did this give me energy or take it? Not, was it fun? Energy. Not, was it productive? Energy. Some things are fun but draining. Some things are difficult but energizing. Your subconscious knows what nourishes you, but social conditioning overrides those signals. Research on intrinsic motivation shows that energy is a better guide than enjoyment or achievement. You might discover that socializing depletes you even though you enjoy it. That certain types of work energize you even though they're hard. That activities everyone says are self-care actually drain you. This isn't permission to only do easy things. Some depleting activities are necessary, but you can't sustain a life built primarily on depletion. You need to know your energetic signature, what fills you, what empties you, so you can design accordingly. Track it. 2 weeks. Energy in or energy out. Let the data show you your truth beneath the social expectations. Then reorganize your life around that truth as much as circumstances allow. The conscious life design. You're living a life you didn't design. You're on a path you started years ago, continuing because you started, not because you would choose it today. That's path dependency. You keep going because you're already going, not because it's where you want to go. Here's the reset. Once per quarter, completely redesign your life on paper as if starting fresh. If you could start from zero today, knowing what you know now, with no obligation to your past choices, what would you build? Where would you live? What would you do? Who would you spend time with? How would you structure your days? What would you stop doing? What would you start? Be radical. This is a thought experiment, not a commitment. Let yourself imagine the life you'd actually choose if you weren't bound by what you've already chosen. Then look at the delta, the gap between that designed life and your current life. You probably can't implement everything, but you can implement one element, one change that moves you from path-dependent to path-chosen. Research on fresh start effects shows that psychological new beginnings increase motivation. You're creating one artificially, not waiting for New Year's or a birthday, but manufacturing the reset yourself. Your subconscious gets trapped in continuation bias. It assumes the future should look like the past simply because the past already happened. But that's not logic, it's inertia. Quarterly redesign. One element implemented. Slowly, deliberately, you're ensuring your life reflects current values rather than historical momentum. You're not stuck. You're just continuing. There's a difference. And now you know how to stop.